Hey everybody, welcome back to another reasonable price prediction series where we try to figure out where your favorite altcoins could be headed. Now today we're looking at Avalanche, and it's going to be another one of those videos where we're comparing the 4-year cycle to the left translated cycle theory. Now, interesting fact, before we get quite into it, if we take a look at how long it took for Avalanche to launch after the previous halving, it was 6 weeks. And funnily enough, if we take a look at how many weeks it's been since the last halving in 2024, it's been 6 weeks. So happy birthday, Avalanche. Technically now we have a full cycle of data to work with. So having said that, let's take a look at what Avalanche has been up to. Now we can see since about November, late October time, or even the start of October, Avalanche, you could argue, has been in a bull run. It's been well above the bull market support band for a long time. And you can see more or less from November to April, it stayed above this. So 5 months of price action above the bull market support band, and a bull market support band trending upwards. However, we can see since April, mid-April, we have dipped below this bull market support band and have seemed to have been trading more or less sideways. We can see this range is from around $10 with lows of 30 and the highest wick being about $41. And just to kind of confirm, we've been trading sideways for about 7 weeks now, 6 weeks, give or take, If we go back, and you know what, let's not even choose which one we're going to look at yet. Let's have a look at both of these possible theories that people are arguing that we're currently in. The 4-year cycle would suggest that we will trade sideways for the next 8 weeks, give or take. We can see here 8 weeks of trading sideways before seeing a very strong pull down. But hey, maybe you don't believe in the 4-year cycle theory anymore. Maybe this time's different. Maybe we're in the left translated cycle theory. If we take a look at what happened here, we can see we traded within a similar range, about $15. So here, where we're working with about 12, we're currently, in the left translated cycle theory before, we were working with about 15. So not a huge jump. And also we can see that we kind of traded sideways for about 12 weeks before having a strong move to the downside. So to make something clear, kind of straight off the bat, whichever one of these two you think we're most likely in, and of course we don't have to be in either of these, and it would be foolish to assume that every cycle is going to play out the exact same. But if you think that we're broadly following a similar trend as we did last cycle, or we're following a broad trend of the left translated cycle, you could make a very good case that either way, whichever one you believe in, we're going to see a move to the downside. And we're going to see that move to the downside pretty quickly. Now, there are a few things that you can dispute here. You can say that because of this strong move to the upside, we've technically been trading upwards, putting in higher highs, and therefore there isn't a range that we're really oscillating within, like we were previously, and therefore we can disregard this information. And you can see here, especially with the left translated cycle theory, you can see we started to put in lower lows within kind of 6 weeks of being within this range. And if we kind of move 6 weeks from having been in this range after this strong green move that put us at this level above $32, we can see we haven't really been putting in lower lows. You can argue that we have, technically, after 6 weeks, but not to the same degree that we were here. So that's one discrepancy. You could argue the same thing with this guy here. We haven't been putting in these lower lows. We've been kind of flatlining. So first of all, that's the first difference. But again, I will rebuttal that by saying that everything before the halving, we have no context for ever beforehand with Avalanche. This was all new territory. Technically, the only week we can really use past performance to judge is this one here, the one that we're currently in, and that's green. And hell, would you believe it, that week 4 years ago was also green. I don't think we'll see a move like this, but ultimately means nothing, basically. What I'm trying to say is that comparing this move and this move is more or less a complete guessing game. There's no way to know for sure if we are in a left translated cycle. So comparing it to this move is, again, might as well be comparing it to any other altcoin during this time frame. And comparing it to this move is also difficult because we don't have the context that came before this. Now, another interesting point to look at is that 30 weeks after the halving, we can see Avalanche bottomed out here. It put in a low that we then moved up from into this other range where we continue to follow our cycle. So again, let's just assume that we're ignoring this first week and there's 6 weeks since the halving, so we'll subtract 7 from 30 weeks to get this point here, this week. Let me zoom in. So we're getting this exact week. This is 7 weeks in, or this is the 8th week after the halving. We can say we bottomed out 22 weeks after that week. If we take a look at the first kind of week that we were in, where we moved, we had this strong move into the range, and then we had our first week. If we go 22 weeks out from there, what do we get? We also get the bottom. So I just want to point out that whichever camp you kind of believe in, previously Avalanche did the exact same thing, more or less, give or take. Now the percentages were different, but the time frames were more or less identical. And when you have such limited data to work with, if you're going to let that limited data influence your decision, and it's lining up a lot like this, it would be very easy to kind of believe that we'll get something similar. And I couldn't knock you too much for believing that. I mean, that's what I would kind of be inclined to believe. So if we go 30 weeks, well, first of all, how many weeks have we been going sideways, give or take? Well, first key difference is that we've moved down into this range. Instead of every single time before, we moved up into the range. This time we moved down into the range. But how many weeks have we been in this range? We moved down, measured from that first week, it's been 7. Another key difference is that, if you're including from the halving point, this gets skewed to plus 30. But if you're measuring from this first point in the range that we oscillated within, it's moving from 22. Now these line up as 22 weeks. So if you want to say 22 weeks, we put in our low from moving into the range, we can see that we should be bottoming out around September time of 2024. Now, if you want to take the 30 weeks from the halving, it brings you down to this guy here, which would, for reference, be $14 that Avalanche would bottom out at if it follows this general uptrend, this general long-term uptrend that it has been slowly following all of its life. Now, it could very well break down below this. There's no way of knowing for sure. It's just it's more of a place marker than anything. If we're following the 22 weeks from the first week, 22 weeks in, what kind of a price would that bring us to? It'll bring Avalanche down to $13, kind of 30 cents. So there's a dollar difference in both of these moves. Either way, it kind of suggests Avalanche is going to see bad price action. Another thing that supports this is that we are below the bull market support band, and we've been below it while we've been oscillating within this range. Previously, we were above when we were oscillating within this range. Now here, we can't say because we didn't have the price action beforehand, but this is definitely bearish to me, and bullish people would make the case, well, it's been hugging the bottom of the bull market support band. It's going to break up. We can see it's made wicks above it. It's showing real bullishness. It's just having a bit of selling pressure right now. And that's valid. You could argue that. But I would say if it was a bullish case, it would be riding the top of the bull market support band. It would be close, but it would be riding the top. I see this as it's riding below. People are putting up a fight, but Avalanche can't put anything concrete in. And when it tries, it gets rejected and brought back down. So to me, this looks more like a going out with a bang than the calm before the storm, if you get me. Where the storm is great upside, or at least moving above the bull market support band in a sustained way. Finally, this isn't really too important, but we can see the moves during these times. Avalanche was putting in lower lows each time. We can see here it was about 6 weeks after moving up into this range, Avalanche started putting in lower lows, and here it just generally put in lower lows after the oscillation, after the moving within the range period. Here, these are clones. You can see these are like copy and pastes of the degrees at which we moved at. I think we can, this guy happened 6 weeks after moving up into this range. I'm going to move this over here to this current point because obviously it didn't play out like that before. Whichever way you think it might happen, of course, it doesn't have to follow either of these. I doubt it will follow either of these in any particular way, but just to to cover all ground, it could potentially bring us down to $13. It could have us somewhere around $16, depending on which one you think we are. Again, this 4-year cycle one would bring us to about $16. This left translated cycle theory would bring us to about $13. Either way, I kind of think this is a good thing. It gives a lot of people to buy more cheap, and it also means that whichever stage we're at, we have a strong potential to see a crazy move like we did last time, where we got these 2,000% moves. And from this low, it was like 5,000%. Yeah, 5,200% moves to the upside. I don't think we'll get moves that drastic, but the way Avalanche has been performing, it's shown that it's not completely died, it's not completely forgotten about. There is still interest surrounding the product, and the price action has reflected that. I think we could see strong moves, and to bring us to this kind of upward range, this overbought territory, we're only a 300% move away. Now, if we move down to these lows, it's a 1,000% move away, more or less. But we saw Avalanche very recently do a 600, 700% move, 650% move. So to say a 10x basically from these lows is out of the question would be foolish, because we've seen it do the majority of this move before. And again, if it's moving from a low to a high, especially if it's trading down much lower and then moving to that high, it's much more plausible. It's much more realistic, in my opinion. Anyway, that's kind of the US dollar covered. I don't have anything more to say. So having a look at the Bitcoin chart, we can see that there's a case to be made for, again, the 4-year cycle and the left translated theory. You can see that currently what we've seen is we've put in a high, we've put in a lower high, and then we've kind of broken down below a key support here. If the 4-year cycle is what you're currently believing in, we see Avalanche put in a high, put in a lower high, broke down below a key support. And again, for the left translated cycle, very much like the US dollar chart, both kind of painting a similar picture. We put in a high, you could argue we put in a lower high because this wick is much higher up. And then we break down below a key support, this white line here at 4,000 Satoshis. We broke that down below that. Now we are slightly more at a higher elevation. This cycle, we broke down below the 6,000 Satoshi level. And kind of just looking at these, this one, the left translated cycle theory, does look a lot more similar to where we currently are in the cycle. Now, we didn't have this kind of double top like we saw last time, but you could argue that this could be adjusted to something like this. And then you could move this guy down as well. And suddenly they're a lot more similar. Everything before that does seem to kind of look very similar to sharp decline, strong move to the upside, strong move to the upside, move above a bull market support band. Our top, a bit of a bowl, putting in a lower high, bit of a top, putting in not much of a bowl, but again, similar type moves, putting in that second high, and then another capitulation, breaking down below the support that we kind of found ourselves visiting pretty late on, kind of just before or just after this second top. We can see we visited it just before here, and you can also see we visited it just before here. And even like the last few months that we've been looking at, slow kind of bleed, nothing too terrible looking, but still going down. Here we can see kind of the same thing, slow bleed, but still going down. Interestingly enough, it was 9 weeks where we break down below this line to where we made the move back above it. We are now currently at 8 weeks. 8 weeks when we broke down below here, and the current week that we're in now. So potentially we could be making a move back up to the upside on the Bitcoin pair within the next week or two. I don't know if that's the case, but if you're subscribed to the left translated cycle theory, that is probably something you'll want to be looking at. Or if you're 4-year cycle theory, where we're basically this week now, you could argue that actually no, we're probably seeing this play out, these few weeks of kind of slow bleeding. We're probably seeing this happen here, and then we're going to have a strong sell-off and really put in our lows. Now that might just be returning to this kind of 3,500 kind of Satoshi range. We could come back to that. I think we probably will. I think altcoins are still due to bleed against Bitcoin. Ultimately, it's very difficult to say, especially with such limited data. And again, it's up to you to draw your own opinion from these charts. A quick look at where we could go if we come down to these lows, or if you argue that we kind of visit this low at this higher, more elevated level. We saw Avalanche make, from the low to the high, a 2,300% move on its Bitcoin pair. I don't think we'll see that again against Bitcoin, but again, a 10x would bring us well above these previous highs at about 35,000 Satoshis. Or we could kind of just see Avalanche return to these highs, suggesting that, again, if we come back down to the low, we could see Avalanche outperform Bitcoin to a degree of 750%. which again, I actually think is kind of reasonable for an altcoin that has already been through a whole cycle. We see them often see diminishing returns. This is normal. This is not me being a bear. This is just me stating a fact. It's very rare for altcoins to continuously put in crazy 100x moves each cycle without it having to go down 99.999%. So seeing it return to these BTC highs, I don't think is kind of a bearish thing to say. I obviously hope that it does. Now, performing Bitcoin to a magnitude of 7.5 is pretty good, because if Bitcoin does a 2x or a 3x or a 4x, that means Avalanche is kind of in the ballpark of a 30x or a 20x or a 15x. Either way, pretty bullish stuff in my opinion. If I can 15x my money, I'm going to be pretty happy. So I'm going to wrap up the video there, guys. If you liked the video, please leave a like. If you didn't, leave a dislike. That's totally fine too. Please check out the Twitter and the Reddit. They'll be linked in the description below. And comment whether you think we're in the 4-year cycle, the left translated cycle, or something completely different. Always interested to hear from you guys. Thanks so much, guys. Take care and peace.